a microorganism living in water. It has no faculties for thinking or understanding. It simply moves in response to stimuli received from the outside. Now here's something which moves when stimulated by light. A simple apparatus created by electronics. It has an eye which rotates, seeking light. When the light falls on it, the wheel turns. This eye is a device called a photoconductive cell. The light falling on it is turned into an electric pulse, which switches on the motor. So each time light strikes the photoconductive cell, the pulse runs an errand. This device, like a living organism, turns the stimuli from light into pulses while moving towards the light. In remote antiquity, a nervous system began growing for the first time in animal life in the oceans. In the early stages, it consisted of a large number of nerve cells whose fibers were ramified into a network. Stimuli received by the body were turned into pulse signals and transmitted to the muscles through nerve fibers. In the next stages of development, the network of nerve fibers was consolidated in the form of a ladder. Then the nerve cells and their fibers gradually took the form of a cord which ran through the center of the body. Thus the spinal cord came into being, and one end swelled to form the brain. In this way, the nervous system advanced to still higher stages of development. The electronic circuit, too, has been highly developed. For instance, the vacuum tubes used in the early stages have been replaced by transistors. And further development has produced the micromodule. Coils, resistors, transistors, transformers, and capacitors, all these elements are integrated in this micromodule, which in itself is a complete working unit, and to this extent resembles a nerve cell. This is an experiment to detect the pulses. A thin electrode is inserted into a nerve cell to provide the stimulus. The nerve cell and the approaching electrode. An oscilloscope will record the pulses. A pulse appears. This is a nerve cell taken from the embryo of a vertebrate. It's the cell of a sensory nerve which relays the pulses from the skin and muscle nerves to the motor nerves and the brain. Nerve fibers can be likened to pieces of electric wire, and this one has been tissue cultured for observation. The nerve cell is constantly putting forth fibers created from its own resources. The ramifying ends of the fibres converge and continue to extend. They're naked wires, so to speak, produced by nature. But now another kind of cell has appeared to encircle the naked wire. The white spot in the middle is the nucleolus. This swan cell, as it's called, steadily twines around the nerve fibre. This is a section of a nerve fibre under the electron microscope. The white area in the centre is the axis, and the dark lines surrounding it are the insulating material created by the swan cell. Nerve fibre, then, is insulated wire produced by nature. The nerve fibres steadily grow as the swan cells continue twining around them. These are the cells of the skin, neatly arranged like stones in a wall. Here is one of them, and the extreme ends of a ramified nerve can be seen approaching. Finally, they meet. The fibre attaches itself to the skin cell by embracing it. Soon the cell begins to convey the stimuli received at the skin by turning them into pulses. That's to say, it functions as a tactile receptor. This is muscle tissue containing muscle fibre, and once again a nerve fibre can be seen approaching. As it moves, it extracts nutrient from the fluid of the culture medium. The nerve fibre strives to reach the muscle fibre. The nerve cells, which have been isolated for experiment, continue to put out fibres in an effort to find the cells they are predestined to link up with, just as they would do in a living body. Fibres of sensory nerves link to skin and muscles in a fine network. These two cells have become linked in the culture fluid, demonstrating how pulses are relayed from one cell to another. The cell in the centre is that of a motor nerve which orders the muscles to move. When a section of the spinal cord is placed in culture fluid, various cells emerge, including motor nerve cells. These link up with nerve fibres and receive the pulses which they relay to the muscle tissue, causing it to react. Here's an experiment with a model showing how a nerve circuit works. Pieces of iron wire are placed in concentrated nitric acid. These represent sensory and motor nerves. And here is a model of a muscle. A thin film forms on the surface of the iron wire as it reacts to the acid. The muscle is touched with a zinc rod. An electrochemical reaction takes place and produces a pulse which runs along the wire. The pulse runs through the sensory nerve cells to the motor cell, and the motor cell sends out a pulse of command. The command is transmitted to the muscle. Here's an explanation of the principle involved. The electric stimulus given to the iron destroys the film which is formed on its surface. The film reforms as the pulse passes on. Notice that the white film darkens as it's destroyed, but becomes white again as it reforms. A similar electrochemical reaction takes place along nerve fibers. In the model, the travelling pulses are visible as dark running spots on the surface of the wire, and like nerve pulses, they run without attenuating. The calf muscle of an animal. Just as a rap on the kneecap tendon causes a jerk of the leg, so the stretching of a muscle causes it to contract in a reflex action. Two systems of nerves run through the muscle. One consists of special receptors which detect tension when the muscle is pulled and transmit the sensation by means of pulses. They're called muscular spindles since they're spiral in shape. The other is composed of motor nerves, which order the muscle to contract in response to the tension. This is an experiment to tap these pulses. A part of the spine is cut open to expose the spinal cord, which comprises tens of thousands of nerve fibers. Of these, those of the sensory and motor nerves which control the muscle of the calf are selected and placed on an electrode. The fibers on the right are those of the sensory nerves coming from the muscular spindles, and the ones on the left are those of the motor nerves which transmit orders to the muscle. One end of each fiber is cut off to tap the pulses running through them. It's an extremely difficult task to detect pulses running through a single fiber, and to facilitate this, the brain of the animal is removed. The muscle is stretched. Pulses are discharged from the muscle spindles, the frequency of the pulses indicating the degree of tension. These are the pulses transmitting commands to the muscle from the motor nerves. This is a dyed specimen of an eyeball. The retina at the eye ground, a close-up of its highly complicated structure. This is a schematic chart of the retina. Whenever light enters the eye, the group of visual cells on the right receives a stimulus, and pulses run through the nerve cells which are linked to the visual cells. A countless number of pulses are transmitted to the brain through the mass of fibers on the left. Visual cells of the rod type. Here's a close-up of one of those cells, which are receptors responding to light. Pulses are emitted while the stimulus lasts, and also for a brief period after it ceases. An eardrum delicately vibrating. The vibration of the eardrum is conveyed by the bones adjacent to Cortis organ deep in the ear. Cortis organ, which contains the auditory or hair cells. The hair-like fibers of these cells vibrate in response to sound and transmit pulses to the auditory nerve, a portion of Cortis organ removed from a living body. The pulses flowing through a living animal are tapped by inserting a thin electrode into the auditory center of the brain. The nerve cells in the auditory center and the electrode being inserted. Locating the nerve cells is an extremely difficult operation. The pulses required have finally been intercepted. The pulse height is uniform and their frequency indicates the strength of the stimulus. Electronics, by the use of circuits, can create artificial nerve fibers. Here's a diagram of one of these circuits. A stimulus is fed in from the left. Whether the stimulus is strong or weak, the circuit transmits it as a uniform pulse. An artificial nerve fiber made up of a series of these circuits. A stimulus is introduced and the cathode ray tube shows it to be a weak pulse. The lower part of the tube shows the size of the uniform pulse, while the upper part shows the stimulus being converted to that standard. This electronic device can simulate one of the functions of the nerve fiber in that it's able to convey stimuli in pulses of uniform size. The nerve cells and fibers of the human brain. The stimuli received at all parts of the body are transformed into pulses which constantly flow into this network. The nerve cells, which number some 15,000 million, receive, memorize and process the signals and issue orders for action. And this is part of a man-made brain, the memory of an electronic computer. The electronic memory works in this way. Pulses come from below at regular intervals. Others also come from the right. As they intersect, the core at that point is magnetized. Combinations of magnetized and non-magnetized cores are formed on the horizontal lines, each representing a word or code. In the human brain, it's likely that information is accumulated in the form of combinations of nerve cells which have undergone various changes. Pulses come in regularly from below and also from the left to revive the information stored in each line. These words or codes are then conveyed to the arithmetic unit up the diagonal lines. The arithmetic circuits perform calculations with a speed and accuracy far beyond human capabilities. But the human brain is far more delicate and has a complicated structure for controlling the entire body by means of pulses. Man can adjust himself to his ever-changing environment only because he has this remarkable brain. A heart that has stopped beating. The pulse signals which move the muscles have ceased to come. An electrode is inserted to supply electronic pulses. The prostrate heart has resumed pulsating vigorously with the help of artificial pulses. The pulses running through the animal body and those of electronic devices function in the same way. Electronic apparatus and man can communicate with each other by means of pulse signals. This is a diagnostic machine. By the manipulation of the switches, symptoms are fed into the machine. In this case, they are disturbance in gait, chronic headaches and nausea, and congestion of the eye ground. The machine has numerous combinations of symptoms and the corresponding diseases stored in its memory unit. The needle of the meter moves, indicating that the trouble is a tumor in the cerebellum. An explosion on the sun's surface. A parabola antenna receives the pulses of the electric waves emanating from the disturbance. Pulses of electric waves also come from nebulas. They are signals that tell of upheavals occurring in space. Particles of cosmic rays also come in from outer space. These rays are detected by telescope. High-energy particles entering the darkened tube send out flashes of light known as Cherenkov radiation. The light condensed by the reflector mirror enters the photoelectric multiplier, and the electric pulses produced are routed to the electronic circuit. The number of particles entering the mirror tube from a definite direction is counted, and this affords more information about the universe. The huge reflector in the mirror tube. A set of photoelectric multipliers faces the mirror. The moment the reflected light enters these multipliers, it's converted into pulses. This is the multiplier. The coincidence circuit separates the light pulses from noise. The recording unit, composed of arithmetic and memory circuits. The pulses are processed and recorded on tape. Electronics can detect particles invisible to the naked eye and present them in the form of pulses. The science of electronics is developing rapidly and is now being utilized in the bid to develop outer space. The human brain is a marvelous world of pulses evolved by nature, and electronics, which was born of the human brain, is also a world of pulses. The interrelation between natural creation and modern technology is truly remarkable. Indeed, electronics is now seeking in the mechanism of the human brain the avenue to higher development, while man is looking to electronics for aid in his eternal quest for knowledge.